Alright, let's talk DCEU. The first film in the DCEU is Man of Steel, a movie which garnered somewhat of a mixed response from critics, but seems to have fared a little bit better with fans. A lot of people give this movie a lot of love. To be honest with y'all, though, I haven't been that big of a fan of it. I certainly don't think that it's bad. I think that the first act or so on Krypton, and even just that kind of more visual take that Snyder opts to go for in Superman's origin once he's on Earth, I think all of that works exceptionally well, but by the time you get to the second half, and it's just one action scene after the next, and it starts to get convoluted, it becomes a little bit messy. Now, that being said, I don't think that it's a bad movie. I think it's a fine movie. It's just not my favorite. I'm going to give Man of Steel a C. Unless that seems a little bit harsh. You gotta remember, C is saying that at least 70% of the movie is functioning pretty well, and I think that that's kind of a fair way to look at Man of Steel. Next up, we have Batman v Superman, The Dawn of Justice, and a movie which has generated no controversy whatsoever. Critics absolutely destroyed this thing when it was released in theaters, in its non-extended state, of course. Fans seem to be a little bit more lenient towards it, or at least more divided. There's some people who will defend this movie to the ends of the earth, and there's some people who think that it's one of the worst superhero films ever made. This is actually one of my more controversial movie opinions that I hold, and maybe I'll go into it in more detail eventually, but I think this movie is actually pretty great. I think it's definitely overhated. I think it's a pretty artful take on the genre. I think it does a really interesting job of deconstructing both Batman and Superman, just sort of in light of our more postmodern context. But I also think it avoids a lot of the cynicism that would creep its way into said postmodern context, and ultimately offers a more redemptive view of both characters even as it critiques and deconstructs them. I don't think it's perfect. I think that when you're doing a movie that's this sort of artfully done, it's not a very good point to build a universe off of. And I think that's where this movie struggles, and I think that's where a lot of the controversy stems from. It's really not a great movie to build a universe off of. That being said, I don't think it's a bad movie. And really, I should go into more detail on that. Maybe I'll go into a full-length review on this movie eventually, just because everyone has very, very divided opinions on it. Next up, we have Suicide Squad, the first film to be directed by somebody other than Zack Snyder. This one is a David Ayer movie, and it sucks. This is the first movie in the DCEU that I've really found outrightly terrible, and it has some redemptive aspects to it, don't get me wrong. Margot Robbie is a fantastic Harley Quinn. Will Smith is a great Deadshot. It's fun seeing more of Ben Affleck's Batman and the sort of more official debut of Ezra Miller's Flash. That being said, the cons here topple any sort of pros you could find. The editing is especially just egregious. The colors just don't mash well together at all. In a lot of ways, it feels almost like a Sci-Fi Channel original film more than a big-budget blockbuster. I really don't like this movie, guys. I'm gonna give this movie a D minus. Also, it occurs to me I kind of forgot to give a rating to Batman v Superman. My bad. I'll give that movie an undecided score, just because I want to go into it in more detail. Fortunately, after Suicide Squad shook my faith a little bit in the future of the DCEU, we got Wonder Woman, which was the first DCEU movie to land a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, a pretty high one at that. Found a great deal of critical acclamation, and that is, of course, Wonder Woman, which is just a great film. No, it's not necessarily perfect. The last act in particular really struggles as it falls into a very familiar superhero formula. The CGI in this movie isn't great, but Gal Gadot is fantastic as the lead character. Patty Jenkins helms this project, and her direction is simply outstanding. And at the end of the day, Wonder Woman is a solid A-minus film for me. I don't think it's my favorite superhero movie ever made, but it was certainly a big step up for the DCEU, And overall, it's a very enjoyable and well put together film. And then we have Justice League. Yeah. Justice League isn't a horrible movie whatsoever. It's not a great one. It's not even a particularly good one. But I really do think that the good in this movie in the end outweighs the bad. For one thing, the cast chemistry is really on point. It's really fun watching all the characters interact. Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot sharing the screen together for a large portion of the film really helps because they play off of each other really well. Really, the sort of damning flaw of this movie, in a lot of ways, is the villain Steppenwolf, who is probably the worst superhero villain that has graced our screens in a long time. The look of this movie is also a little bit inconsistent. Some shots are absolutely gorgeous. There's that one towards the end where they're standing next to that nuclear missile silo, and there's all the like weird alien flowers sprouting everywhere. And it's just a great shot of the League together. But then you have some messy shots, or shots that are obviously shot in front of green screen that make the movie feel cheaper than it probably should. The dialogue is also kind of hit or miss. There's some lines that I think are pretty funny or fun or kind of highlight the different personalities present. There's some stuff that just feels forced in for the sake of humor, and yeah, I don't really like a lot of it. That being said, at the end of the day, I can't really find myself outrightly hating this movie or calling it bad. I just don't think it's super good, and it's a solid C minus. Definite step down from Wonder Woman, but still a fun and entertaining film to watch on a weekend. Next up, we have Aquaman, and it's on a Blu-ray yet, so I don't have anything for it. All right, next up we have Aquaman. And this movie's great, honestly. It's fast, it's fun, the performances are great. It's campy, but in a good way. James Wan brings in just absolutely breathtaking visual direction to this movie, both with the action sequences and the special effects. And it's really hard for me to not greatly enjoy this movie. Sure, it's not perfect. Like I said, it's campy and that aforementioned sort of nature to the film can sometimes drag it down and make it feel cheesier than it maybe should, but all things considered, I'm a massive fan of this movie. I think it's the DCEU's best movie alongside Wonder Woman, and it's also a solid A minus for me. Just having had some time to kind of think back on it and give it some more thought, yeah, no, this movie is definitely worth seeing. And I think that more so than anything else, what I love about it is that it stands alone excellently as just its own film with its own unique vision, which kind of transitions into what I want to talk about next, which is what's next for the DCEU and where does it stand as a whole right now? As a whole, it's been a little bit of a bumpy and inconsistent ride. Yeah, like I said, there's only one movie so far that I really find terrible, and that's Suicide Squad. But even then, it's hard to argue that it's really made a case for itself in establishing its own voice and its own universe apart from the far more successful Marvel films. And that really kind of hurts me in a lot of ways because growing up, I was definitely way more of a DC guy than a Marvel guy. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't really like to spark that fan war. I think it's largely unnecessary. I think you can enjoy both franchises at the same time. You don't need to pick. Come on. But it's still hard not to feel a little bit underwhelmed by where DC is right now. I don't, again, think that most of these movies have been bad. Man of Steel, very controversially, Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, and even a little bit Justice League, and certainly Aquaman, have all been very entertaining theater experiences for me, and they're movies that I definitely liked more than I didn't like. But going forward, and this is going to be a little bit controversial, and it's nothing that I hold against the guy, but I'm a little bit glad that Zack Snyder's involvement seems to have been downplayed to a more producer role. And it's, again, not because I even really dislike the films that he brought to the table here. It's more of, I just don't think that he's the right guy to stem an entire cinematic universe off of. James Wan and Patty Jenkins, I think, demonstrated with Wonder Woman and Aquaman, respectively, that the way that these movies and this whole universe should go going forward is just with really, really solid, outstanding, and excellent individual films that, yeah, can have fun little Easter eggs and references with each other, but ultimately can stand apart on their own and just give us these great characters and universes that they partake in. And going forward, it kind of seems like that's the direction that they're going. Coming up next, we have Shazam, which has the director of Lights Out helming the project. There's been some discussion about a Blue Beetle film, which should be really, really fun. And we got Wonder Woman, 1984, once again helmed by Patty Jenkins, which is really exciting. And even Aquaman's post-credit scene just seemed to set up more Aquaman, which I think is great. It might be too soon to say it, and certainly the way that Shazam turns out will lend or take away credence to the statement, but I think that it's possible that Warner Brothers has kind of figured out what they want to do with these movies. And I'm got my fingers crossed here, guys. I really, really, really hope that going forward we get more films like Wonder Woman and Aquaman, movies that can win over critics and audiences alike and kind of show people that, yeah, no, there's some things about DC that are unique and different apart from Marvel, and it has its own stories to tell and its own fun universes to bring to the table. As a whole, I'm going to give the DCEU a solid B minus. It's not pushing the boundaries. It's certainly not keeping up with the competition that Marvel is offering so far, but I really have a hard time finding these movies bad, guys, except for Suicide Squad, which I think is outrightly terrible. And really, honestly, I gave it a D minus, but let's just give that movie an F just for simplicity's sake. It's just not a good movie whatsoever. But I can't really say the same for all of them, and certainly there's been a couple of them that have proven themselves to be exceptional and fun superhero-going experiences, despite some issues that they may have as films. I really think that those two should be the templates going forward. Once again, repetitive, I know, but Wonder Woman and Aquaman. Just give us more movies like those. Give us more movies that are fun when they need to be, are dark when they need to be, have great directors helming the projects, are well edited, well put together, well written, and just give us movies like we haven't seen before. I think that there's hope for the DC Extended Universe fam. I really do. I think Wonder Woman and Aquaman especially show that when you partner the right director with the right project, there can be great movies that take place in this universe, and it's certainly something that I'm sure Warner Brothers is recognizing, especially as Aquaman is maybe going to eventually reach $1 billion. Like, I mean, hopefully, I can't say for sure, but a lot of box office analysts are saying that it might just pull that off, which would just be huge. So yeah, DCEU, certainly not the mess that a lot of people like to make it out to be, but definitely not the most cohesive universe so far. And I also don't think that they should retroactively try to, like, erase these movies or the other movies besides Wonder Woman and Aquaman, because I do think that there are merits. I think Ben Affleck's great. I love Henry Cavill as Superman. And honestly, the whole cast as a whole is just doing a really good job. And I'd want to see more of these characters. I want to see more Flash. I want to see more Cyborg. Cyborg is awesome. Honestly, like, they got him really, really right in these movies. And yeah, I'm kind of starting to ramble now, but yeah, I got hope, guys. All right, peace out, fam.